All right, so welcome to Sweet and Savory Edible Gifts. This is part one. We're going to have part two with additional sweet and savory edible gifts coming up in a couple of weeks on Wednesday evening. I believe it's the 18th from 5:30 to whenever. So hopefully you have already signed up for that. And if you haven't, definitely check that out when you get a minute because it's going to be a fun time. I am going to be turning this over to Chef Amber first. We're going to spotlight her video so everybody can see Chef Amber, and she's going to get us started. And I'm going to start dropping those recipe PDFs in the chat box for you. So be on the lookout if you're looking for those. They are coming your way.
So hi, we have Chef Katie and I have lots of recipes that we'll be doing today. I would really appreciate, and I'm sure Chef Katie will as well, that way if anyone is cooking along, if you could let us know in the chat box which recipes you are cooking along so we can go a little bit slower on those and a little bit more practical with time. So that way we make sure that you're not getting put too far off. Currently, I'm going to start with making the truffle recipe. It's an easy chocolate truffles. I'm starting by heating up my heavy cream. I'm using a local heavy cream. They're marking it as organic heavy cream. So I am just mixing mine gently. If Heather, you could switch over to my stovetop view. I'm trying to keep it to a scald, but not to a boil. And a lot of the times it's hard to do that when you have such a high fat content. So I have this heat safe spatula, super nifty, just scraping down the sides a little bit. And then I'm also measing out everything I'm gonna make. So I, for my truffles, am doing a combo of, I'm not quite there at 100% dark chocolate yet. So mine is a blend of dark chocolate and semi-sweet chocolate chips. Again, it's really whatever works best for you. And so if you're still on a little bit of semi-sweet, that's completely understandable. We get it. I'm just gonna put that amount in the recipe, which is a cup and a 3/4. This recipe does double really well if you decide to make 2 batches of truffle. And then this one's very, very simple at the beginning. The most important step is that when we put our cream over the chocolate, we want to make sure we don't mix it so that way it doesn't start to cool too quickly. Anytime we're mixing, we're incorporating cold air and then we are cooling it. So I just got my cream up to temp. Main thing is that I'm looking for, you could use a thermometer, but I'm just trying to make sure it doesn't do a complete boil. And then I'm pouring that over my chocolate as evenly as I can distribute that. And then if you are going to do any flavor mix-ins like vanilla extract, orange extract, you could put those in now. If you're doing a nut butter mix-in, you'd want to wait a little bit. And then I'm doing this secondary half cleanup, half fail-safe technique, where anytime I do something in a pan, I always put water in it to boil it off, which we do have a lot of the fat crystallization burning on the side of the pan. And so I'm going to put that on low. The main reason I'm doing that right now is because if my chocolate isn't at the right temperature when I mix it and it's still lumpy, I can use this almost as a double boiler and make sure that I'm not causing any lags in our chocolate to get to temp. So it's going to sit there for a couple minutes, about a minute and a half, 2 minutes, just to let that cream melt into the chocolate. For mine today, I'm going to go ahead and put in some vanilla. For this, we're doing about half a tablespoon. Half a tablespoon isn't really necessarily a real measurement in your set of measuring spoons, so just a little bit more than a teaspoon and a half is the equivalent. So I'm going to go ahead and do
that. Amber, do you think now, can I interject a thought that I wanted to share that I forgot to say before?
Yes.
Okay. So I did want to just make everybody aware today that we did not include nutritional information on these recipes. And that's not necessarily because they're bad for us, but we didn't go out of our way to make them super healthy. I will say these chocolate truffles, for example, would be one that would not necessarily be on our, healthy, normal kind of what we do at GCCM list, but it's the holidays. And, we wanted to give people things that they will enjoy. And I think one of the things that we really promote at Gold Ring is the concept of everything in moderation, right? So this is something that maybe we don't enjoy all the time. And we also kind of will probably look at the portion sizes. Once Amber gets these done, we're going to see the size of them and, kind of think that we're probably not going to eat this entire batch at one time. Some of our other dishes today, though, I will say, definitely fit the mark. And we'll kind of point those out maybe as we go through the things that we know and where we've sort of added some little health benefits to our recipes.
Absolutely. And so these truffles are modified. I changed my yield. So usually for chocolate chips, ganaches, you do about a 1-to-2 ratio. I did a 1-to-3, so that way I can get more yield out of my chocolate, so that way it's less heavy cream. And then I also changed the side of the truffles. I want these to be about 2 bites big. They end up being about a tablespoon big. A traditional truffle would be twice that size. And so I'm just trying to make sure that, I'm one of those people that goes to the holiday table and wants a little bit of all the things. I don't want a big slice of one thing. So I'm trying to do the same idea with these. There we go.
And these are so rich that you probably don't need a lot to get that,
especially the more dark chocolate you do, the more rich they are. I also did a modification in the topping that you can do if you're not interested in straight cocoa powder on the outside as traditional, then you can cut it with 1/4 powdered sugar, and that helps a lot. However, if you don't do that, it's very, very rich. And then I'm just trying to wait till this gets completely. They're not cooperating quite as well as they did the last 3 batches. I made these in a recipe test recently to make sure it'd work, and they were delicious. And so we've made them 3 times since.
You can bring some to my house if you want, Amber.
I'm like, it's 5 people, so I guess I don't feel bad that I'm keep
truffles on truffles on truffles.
Yeah, it's also
I like about this recipe too, Amber, is that I think sometimes people think truffles are something like, oh, so fancy, that must be hard to make. But I think what you're going to show us today, other than maybe the little bit of finickiness of getting your chocolate, your little ganache mixture of your chocolate and cream exactly the way you want it. Other than that, they're super easy to do, right?
Crazy easy. And I was also intimidated by them. And so it's really been helpful for me because I feel like if I'm intimidated by something after spending 4 years in culinary school, chances are other people are too. And so I'm trying to make this the most fail-safe, easy way, can't make any mistakes. Now, I will never tell the people I graduated with that bake that this is a traditional truffle. They would be like, it'd be blasphemy that I use chocolate chips. But it's just an easy way that we're able to make it in a little bit of a cheat.
So if we don't use chocolate chips, what would sort of be like the normal then? We would use just like a bar chocolate or?
Yeah, like a couverture type baking chocolate where you get it in a bar in the baking section.
Gotcha. Okay.
It's not something I keep on hand.
From Trader Joe's, they sell these really big. It's like 1.5 pounds of chocolate, and you can get like dark chocolate, 60%. I also, just to tell you this little thing, that at Trader Joe's, they also sell this stuff called chocolate chunks that look a little bit different than the chocolate chips.
Oh yeah, I've had those before, Katie. They're good. I like them in cookies to give you just a little extra texture.
Mm-hmm. Right. I feel good about this. Let me see if
that looks great, Amber. Very smooth.
Now, so because there's stabilizers in chocolate chips, that's why people generally don't recommend it for this application. It's the emulsifiers are really what we're working against. But that's that's the texture. It's super smooth. If you're gonna put a nut butter like peanut butter, this would be the time to mix it in. And then I'm just taking, I chose a metal, the chef in me used a 6-pan, but any type of metal container because it's going to be a heat conductor. So when I put it in the fridge, it's gonna cool quicker.
That's a great tip, Amber, to think
Yeah.
about the material of the thing you're going to use, whether you want to conduct heat, in a positive way, or if you're trying not to. Too.
And my bowl right now, because I put it over the hot water, is very warm. So it's going to take a lot longer to cool down when I put it in the fridge. I'm definitely a lazy chef. You can ask anybody. And so I try to use the least amount of dishes possible. And I always try to do the most shortcuts as possible. But this is definitely one that I recommend is important. Also, the wider you have a container and the more shallow your mixture is, the quicker it's going to cool. So I'm going to just put this whole container. If you're feeling impatient, you can stick it in the freezer. I'm just going to put it in my refrigerator because that's where I have room. And so that's what determined it for me. And then I'm good on the truffles until we're able to move on to the next step. So that's in the fridge. It's going to be in there about 30 minutes. And then I'm definitely going to lick my spatula while sending this over to Katie.
All right, lick the spatula. And now I'm going to change it over to Katie here. Oops, nope, sorry, wrong one. There we go. Chef Katie is going to take us on our next little journey.
All right, great. So we're gonna make the orange cranberry loaves. If you're cooking along, make sure that your oven is preheated. I also like to grease my pans at this point because if I don't, I realize that my bread's all mixed together and my pans aren't greased. I'll show you. They sell these mini loaves at the grocery store. And they come with nice little lids. There's usually 5 or 6 in a pack, but today we're going to be making 3 of the mini loaves. And I also have all of my ingredients ready. So there were a few things I wanted to talk about, and one of them being the cranberries. I'm going to move you down here. So I've already cut my 2 cups worth of cranberries, but I wanted to show you guys my technique for doing this, which is the first thing I do is I kind of sort through and I look for the really tiny cranberries. So like, compared to this really big one, this one's tiny and I'm not going to cut that in half. So you can save yourself a little bit of time by picking out the really small cranberries. This also gives you an opportunity to find the ones that are like kind of squishy. There's always a few off ones in the bag. In the recipe, I know we talked about that it's okay to use dried cranberries, but I would like to stress that this recipe is so much better with fresh cranberries, and that the whole point of it really is that right now is the time that we can find fresh cranberries in the grocery store. So I do encourage you guys to do that. I also want to show you my egg, orange juice, orange zest mixture. So I went ahead, I cracked my egg into this container and whisked it up. I zested my orange right into here, and then I juiced the oranges that I zested. It just depends on your oranges, right? If they're super juicy, if they're really big, if they're little mandarin oranges, of how much juice you're gonna actually end up with. So I ended up with about 2/3 of a cup of juice using a whole navel orange and a mandarin orange. And then I just topped it off with water. I don't stress, I'm like not going out to buy orange juice just for this recipe. That zest is really going to bring out a lot of the orange flavor. And so that little 1/3 of a cup of water is not going to mess up the oranginess of the loaf. I also want to say that I did not proofread my recipe well enough when I sent it in to Amber to type up, but the total amount of flour for this recipe is 2 cups. The way the recipe reads, or at least it did, was 3 cups. It said 1.5 whole wheat flour and 1.5 white flour, but it's actually just a half a cup of whole wheat flour. And this was a adjustment that I made because this recipe originally just called for 2 cups of white flour, but it just goes to show it's really easy to swap out up to 50-50 of white flour and whole wheat flour. It just adds a little bit of, added nutrition, added fiber. The other kind of strange thing about this recipe is that it does have you sift all of your dry ingredients together, including your sugar. So that's what we're gonna do now. I do want to show you guys, like I certainly do this for the class, but this is exactly what I would have done if I was prepping at home, a lot, because I have 2 kids running around and it gets really confusing about what all I have measured or not. But I have all of my ingredients ready. In this little cup, I have my baking soda, my baking powder, and my salt all together. I've got my 2 flours. I've got my toasted and chopped nuts, my brown sugar, my egg and orange juice mixture, and then I have a little bit of butter here from the refrigerator that I'm gonna dice up when it comes time to incorporate that. So the first thing I'm gonna do in this bowl, well, actually, let's do it right into this big bowl. So I have this great like old school sifter, but you could definitely use something like this, like a fine mesh sifter. And it really is just to make it so that all of our ingredients get mixed together in a uniform kind of way. I'm going to show you a trick with my cookies, but for this one, we're just going to put them all together into this sifter. Everything but, yeah, the cranberries, and then, just see. There we go. Because of that brown sugar, this one sometimes needs a little help, a little shaken, or like I'll eventually stick my hand in there to kind of, you can see like I have a lot of clumps of the brown sugar. So I am definitely a chef that gets my hands into things. So you'll see when it comes time to cut this butter in here, I will also be sticking my hands in it. I believe in washing my hands all the time. And so I don't feel like I need to wear rubber gloves or any of that business. I definitely take off any of my rings because otherwise you just end up with like sugar and flour and butter all trapped in your lovely rings. So I just stuck my hand in there, right, to kind of force this last little bit of brown sugar through. That's good. So I do have a little bit left over. I can feel that it's kind of like hard and crunchy, and it's like less than a teaspoon. So I'm just not going to deal with that. All right, so I've got all of my dry stuff in here. I have this little, I measured my 1/4 cup of butter, and I'm just gonna cut it into a little bit of a smaller pieces to help it incorporate a little bit faster into this. So this recipe was originally a muffin recipe. So it bakes really nicely also as muffins. It bakes nice as a large muffin, but because the intent is to share and to share numerous things in like a kind of gift box, it's nice to make some smaller ones. So I'm now just getting my hands in there. I'm not going crazy. I'm just like smushing it, and then I kind of toss it. You smush those bigger pieces. And then hopefully you guys notice, but I do have those little aluminum pans. They're on a baking tray. So if I was using like one of my large glass loaf pans, I wouldn't worry about the baking sheet, but those aluminum pans can be really flimsy. It sometimes is really hard to rotate them, easily in your oven. So it's so much nicer when you can just have them on the sheet tray, so that when it comes time to rotate and it comes time to pull them out of the oven, that there's a little bit of ease to it. Okay.
Hey, Chef
So,
Katie, I have a quick question for you.
yeah.
If somebody doesn't have brown sugar for this recipe, are you cool with them just doing all white sugar?
Absolutely. You know, really, you can make your own brown sugar at home by just adding a little bit of molasses to your white sugar. So if you have molasses, you could. The thing with brown sugar, I mean, certainly, yes, I assure you, the recipe will be totally fine. It'll be delicious. That is a perfectly fine substitute. Brown sugar is a lot like white sugar, except for it still has the molasses in it, which is why it's moist, right? We can like pack it into a measuring cup versus how, sandy white sugar is. So if you have a little bit of molasses laying around, you can totally make your own brown sugar, but also it's the holidays, it's 2020. So let's make life a little bit easier on ourselves and just sub the white sugar.
Sub that white sugar. It's going to be okay. Another thing regarding sugar that we always like to mention is that you can often just cut down a little bit on the sugar in a recipe and nobody will ever notice. I actually really like doing that with things like chocolate chip cookies. I think they kind of get almost, I personally like it a little bit better. You get more of like a salty sweet situation. I think Chef Katie will talk about that maybe more when she gets to her cookies, but
yeah. Well, yeah, I think it's actually totally relevant for this recipe as well. I feel like 25% is the most you can drop the sugar down without impacting the structure of your bread or your cookie, without messing with that like crispiness, or without it tasting like somebody forgot an ingredient, right? Because you don't want people eating your cookies thinking like, oh, this is wrong. But it's true. Sometimes some cookie recipes are like kind of crazy sweet. So you can easily take out 25% without much effect.
yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I've got my flour ready. I've got this liquid mixture. I'm just going to add it right in. This is one of those moments where, you really only want to mix it until just combined. And that means that once that flour is incorporated, you don't want to continue mixing. And you'll see that this is like a pretty stiff batter. But very similar to like the zucchini bread I've made before. I'm definitely a big fan of quick breads. They freeze really well. They last for a long time, even on the counter or your refrigerator. So that is sufficient. I can see like a little bit of flour, but I know that I now have my chopped pecans and my cranberries that are gonna give me one more opportunity to give a little stir. But I am just folding these in. Again, I'm looking to just get the, so see, look, you can see there was like a little bit of flour hiding at the bottom there. But now I can incorporate that while incorporating my nuts and cranberries. Okay, so that is good, like that. And now I'm gonna put them into my pan. And you're really, anytime you're baking, you're looking for about 3/4 of the way up, because you want to give the batter some room to grow, but you also want it to actually grow above the line of the pan. And that is because then that's when you get that like golden brown top. So if you underfill your pan, then you're going to get like kind of a pale top. And really, we all know you want that like brown, colorful. That means your sugars have caramelized, and that it's going to be, that much more flavorful. And so it looks like I am going to have like a little bit of leftover batter, which is not a big deal because I'm going to show you my favorite little hack. I know I've talked about these. Luckily, there's people who come to my classes every time. So like, I feel like hopefully I have convinced you guys of how often I use these things. And so I'm going to show you real quick. Hold on. All right, I always have these little metal ramekins, and you guys see me use them to measure like my dry ingredients, but I'm just gonna grease this and I'm gonna fill it up. And then now I'll have a little something extra to give my kids, basically, because they're gonna come in and be like, what's that smell? Give me that. So now I have that. So I am gonna try to space out my bread loaves so that they can bake evenly, and they are going in my oven now. I'm going to set a timer for about 11 minutes so that I could rotate.
I love those ramekins, Katie, because I feel like it always gives you a little cook's treat, a little chef's treat tasting portion of whatever it is that you're baking. I love it.
It's true. And then also, you know, another thing I really use it for is portion control, for both myself and my kids. So like if my kids want some cashews, like it's put in this cup, or if they want like yogurt or ice cream. And so it really helps. It looks like a lot because it's full, but it's actually only about 3 ounces, these cups. So you can kind of do that mind game where your brain thinks you're eating more than you actually are because the container is full.
Love
Okay.
that trick.
Alrighty, I'm gonna move on to my cookies. Okay, so I know one thing I did want to talk about is fine salt. So often when we do recipes at Gold Ring, and really just in my everyday life, I use kosher salt. It is the easiest to control when you're like sprinkling with your fingers. It also, because it's a larger grain, when you measure a teaspoon of kosher salt versus like a teaspoon of table salt, it's actually like less salt. But there are some baking moments where fine salt is going to come into play. So you can see like it's kind of just like a normal size. What is it, like 1.5 pound container of this salt, versus the big boxes that I normally get of kosher salt. But so this is what we're using in our cookies today. And I did just want to say that if you don't have fine salt, you can absolutely use table salt, or iodized salt as we know it. And if you only have kosher salt, it is not the end of the world. I would maybe just add like a pinch more than what the recipe calls for, which is that calls for 1/2 teaspoon. So I would maybe just put like a pinch more to get, because I do feel like this cookie is sweet. It's got that chocolate, it's got the sweetened cranberries. And so the salt is actually a pretty important component in that, to give you that balance. One of my other favorite hacks is this one, where again, I mixed up my egg, I added vanilla, and then I put my dried cranberries in this. I make an oatmeal cookie that I do the same thing. And this achieves 2 things, is that it actually kind of hydrates your craisins or raisins from their dried state. It like absorbs some of that liquid, but it also sucks in some of that vanilla flavor. So they're almost just like richer. They also tend to kind of like plump, instead of continuing to just be this kind of dried fruit thing. So I have that part of it ready. I've got my sugar measured. Let's see where we are. I've got my butter measured. I have my salt and my baking powder and my baking soda, again, measured out into this little ramekin. And when we mix them together, you will see why this is really important. So there's a wonderful website that started as a blog called Smitten Kitchen. And Deb Perlman, I give her 100% credit for teaching me this trick, which is by measuring out my leavening agents, instead of having to have a bowl of dry ingredients that I then am going to add to my wet ingredients, I actually can just sprinkle this on top and mix it into my creamed butter and sugar. So we'll go over that. And then the other thing though that I also have those chocolate chunks that I talked about from Trader Joe's. You can use for this cookie bag chocolate chunks. You can use regular chocolate chips. You can use dark chocolate chips, like whatever your chocolate preference is. And then that really large bar of chocolate that I also love getting at Trader Joe's, you can make your own chocolate chunks. So it just kind of depends on what sort of time you have. I own all three because that's just the type of person that I am. I like to cover all my bases, and I bake a lot. And so some recipes, I just have a very specific need of how I want my chocolate. But I did save one thing to show you guys, and that is our toasted pecans. I chopped them up a little bit because I had the pecans that were going with the bread, which let me set my timer because I forgot to do that. Okay, and so I want you guys to see how fine I chop these pecans. Because it almost is going to be like the consistency of the flour. So it's really hard to detect the nuts in this recipe because you are cutting them so fine. And I almost feel like for that reason, oh, and this is actually another great lesson. When chopping, you always want to pay attention for having possible pieces of the nut shell. So we are really fortunate here in New Orleans that we have a lovely farmer's market that functions all year round. My favorite, like my first stop every time is at the Indian Springs Cooperative. Farmer Ben Burkett is such an amazing human being. He grows fabulous food, and they shell every year. They have these pecans that I'm pretty sure they like all just sit around and hang out and shell these nuts. But what that means too is that there's often a little bit of a shell in there, and that is a risk I'm willing to take. But I will also like kind of move my nuts around like this and look and see if there's like another piece, because there really is nothing worse than being the person that gets the shell. And you can often hear, like I'm super deaf, but even I heard my knife hit that. So yeah, so if you live here in New Orleans, I do encourage you to shop at the Crescent City Farmers Market. It is back open, open air, mask required, but they also only let so many people in at a time. But I will say, even when there's a line, it moves really quickly. And then definitely look for the Indian Springs Cooperative. They always have like great shelled peas in the spring, and greens and pecans. They always did helped us with a watermelon tasting at Edible Schoolyard. So I like to make sure I support them. And then often I go and blow the rest of my tokens on baked goods. Okay, so you guys see how fine I have chopped these nuts. And by moving them like this, the finer pieces stay at the bottom, and my larger pieces, move over so that I can really get a good fine chop. All right, I think I'm going to be content with that. Okay, I'm going to stop. All right, so now everything is going to go into my KitchenAid mixer. My butter is softened, and I have measured it out already, that half of a cup. And so once you have, like, the other great thing I think about having your like mise en place ready to go is that it's actually, it feels rewarding. Like, it's like, oh, this is so easy. Oh, I just dump all this in, right? I'm not like measuring as I go. I'm not like I don't even have to look at my recipe, because I know that I already have everything measured and ready to go. So I am going to cream my butter and sugar. And what you're really looking for when you're creaming is it's paler, right? So even though there's brown sugar in it, you're going to see it be lighter in color. And that is because you have incorporated air into your butter and sugar mixture. And I see on the recipe that I was supposed to put my salt in with the butter, but it's not the end of the world. All right, I'm gonna kick it up a little bit here. So I'm on the number 2 on my KitchenAid. I guess you guys can see that. And I am gonna scrape down and get like these little chunks that are on my paddle so that everything is uniform.
Now, Katie, if we don't have a KitchenAid, can we do this with a hand mixer? We just have to be more patient, right? Like, because you really want to get a good creaming going.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, hand mixers do a great job. So I don't know that it would take necessarily any more time. I think if you needed patience, it would be if you were doing it by hand, which is also totally doable. I feel like this is a reasonable amount of butter and sugar. And if your butter is soft, then it should come together really quickly. I definitely will leave butter out overnight on my counter to make sure that it like really is soft. I feel like when you rush things and you're trying to like soften your butter or get your egg up to room temperature, which is something I didn't talk about, but when you're baking stuff like this, it's really good to have everything at the same room temperature. Eggs, you can safely leave raw in the shell for 24 hours on your counter. So if you know you want to make cookies, you can totally pull your butter and your egg like as soon as you wake up in the morning, and then it should be soft, you know, in like an hour or 2. New Orleans, things get soft really fast, so that really helps. But when you add a cold egg to a creamed butter and sugar, that's when you see it looks like it's separated. Same if you add like cold milk or something to it. So that's why a lot of bakers will always recommend that everything is the same temp or room temp. Okay, so I am happy with how this looks. You guys can see that it is definitely a little bit lighter. It's uniform. You know, all of my butter and sugar are combined. So I'm just gonna scrape down my bowl one last time so that everything's here at the bottom. Okay, and drop that back down again. And then what do we got next here? We're gonna add our egg mixture. So I do have, right, I already told you this, my eggs and cranberry and vanilla already all together. And I'm gonna slide that on in. I always use my spatula to get everything out of there because mainly because I want all that vanilla. I'm not willing to sacrifice any of that. And I'm mixing this until just combined. And I'm gonna scrape down one more time. And this time I'm actually gonna take my paddle off because what I want to do is a very even sprinkle on top. And then I don't know if you guys know this, but these paddles like will sit right like that. Can you see? They're flat. So then you don't get like a bunch of butter and stuff on your counter. All right, so I've got my egg mixture and I just scraped my sides down. And then in my ramekin here, I have that baking soda and baking powder and my salt, and I'm just gonna sprinkle it on top. Now, the great thing about this is that what it means is that I can mix this together very well without the fear of over mixing my batter. So cookies, much like bread, you don't want to over mix the flour because it creates a lot of gluten, and then you have a really tough cookie instead of a crunchy or chewy cookie, depending on what you're looking for or what, you know, how your recipe goes. But the other thing that I really love about it is that it saves me from having to dirty like a metal or ceramic bowl to be able to mix those ingredients together well, right? Because that's the whole point, is that you want to make sure that those leavening agents are really well incorporated into your batter, but sometimes that can lead to over mixing. Now, because I mise en place out my flour, I did technically dirty this cup, but in theory, I would not have had to do that. I could have measured it straight from my container into my thing. But also, this is a lot smaller than what I would have had to have used if I wanted to mix all that stuff in, right? So now we're just gonna add all the rest of the stuff. I got my flour, and yes, it's all whole wheat flour. It adds this great earthy nuttiness to it, and I think having the really finely chopped nuts, oats going in now too. Always use old-fashioned oats for these type of recipes. I wouldn't recommend quick oats. And of course, this is like the moment I lose my bench scraper. Oh, I'm gonna do this move with trying to scoop up all my nuts. If I had my bench scraper, I would have used that to pick up those pecans. Okay, and now we're just gonna give this a mix. And again, until just combined. And I even, with these kitchen aids, I save the last little mix to do by hand. Because there's always a little bit of flour at the bottom. So I scrape off, only so much so that I can give my children the paddle. They have a fit if I clean off too much of the dough. All right, and I'm actually kind of pressing down to get my oats covered. Okay, and that is our dough. Okay, now I'm going to show you guys. This is, I think let me check my bread. Okay, the bread's looking good. It has puffed up a little bit above the rim of our tins. And I would like to say that another great reason to have a baking sheet is in case it does spill over, it will end up on your tray, your baking tray, instead of in your oven. All right, now we're gonna make the log to be one of our options of gift giving. So I think it's really nice to give people raw cookie dough, especially if you're somebody like me, that if somebody gives you cookies, you're gonna eat all of the cookies that they give you. You don't want them to go to waste. You don't want them to get stale. But I am a huge fan of having cookie dough in my freezer. And that gives me the option of just cutting off a slice, and then I can bake just 4 cookies or 6 or whatever my family needs, versus having a half or a dozen cookies that we all need to eat. So the log trick is a great way that you can give this as a gift. All right, so I just pulled off a big piece of saran wrap and laid it out pretty flat on my cutting board. And I'm only gonna do half of my cookie dough, because otherwise it really just becomes hard to work with. And I'm gonna use my hands to kind of shape it into a log already. Okay, that looks good. I'm gonna rinse my hands. And now I'm going to wrap my saran wrap around it. And then it's kind of like rolling a burrito, and see how I'm pinching the sides here? to create this like Tootsie Roll kind of shape, okay? And now I'm gonna roll my dough up in that. And then I can twist the sides here, right? So I have this like extended, and I can kind of just flatten those down. And then I'm gonna use my hands. This is how you would roll like a baguette, or like, remember when we made little worms playing Play-Doh? Okay, so you have this, and let me see. And then, so I think you have two options. So I always have this like nice white parchment paper that you can use, and you can roll it up in this. You could definitely use like Christmas wrapping paper. And you can tie two little bows on the end. I will show that for our finale. But what I do want to show you is, again, I'm a very honest person, and I do have cookie dough in my freezer. This was my practice round for this cookie. So, right? So I have this nice log, and I'm just peeling off my saran wrap, making sure I get all of it, because nobody wants to eat plastic. And I've got a baking tray. And I'm just gonna slice off like a 1/4 inch size cookie. And you'll see, can you see like that, it crumbles like a little, which is fine. You really can just put it in the palm of your hand and kind of pinch those back on there.
Katie, you may have said this and I missed it, but did that come straight from the freezer, or did you pull that from the freezer into your fridge?
Okay, so yes, I did pull it. I will admit, you can do both, but this was in my fridge because I didn't want this like awkward moment in front of 30 people with me like struggling with this frozen log. But you truly can cut it straight from your freezer, but just like I showed, like it'll crumble a little bit more, and you really just have to pinch it back together, and you end up with this cookie. Also, you don't even really have to pinch it. You can just stack it on top, and it's all just gonna become one again when it bakes in the oven.
The other thing I wanted to ask you about this recipe is, could we do this as just a drop cookie? If we didn't want to do the log, we could just scoop and do like traditional way too.
Yes, 100%. Yep. And you also, like, if you do a log, I mean, I will say, like, these are kind of big cookies for how I normally like my cookies. I'm usually about like a tablespoon and a half person, which I think is what we talked here was a heaping tablespoon. So you can make your log a little bit skinnier for yourself. But as far as giving a gift, I think this is a nice
size. Love that. Log. And then they can keep it in their freezer if they want, or bake it right away.
Yes, and I think that's the other thing. So I do have family members on this call who receive my edible gifts. Like, we're not just promoting this because we thought it was cool. This is actually something I've been doing for a very long time. And I feel like when you get a box of goodies, often you feel compelled to eat them all. And then you're also surrounded by, well, this was back when life was really fun and we had Christmas parties, but you have these moments where you feel like you're eating all of this holiday food and you don't feel very good about it. And so it's really nice, I think, to give a gift that they can eat a month later, right? After all of this, has happened, and you're like, oh, let's make some fresh baked cookies. And all they have to do is cut it off and bake it. So in the oven, I'm going to go with these, and we'll see how our bread looks. Okay, so my bread has about 4 more minutes. And so I think,
right.
Great.
Yeah, I think we'll transition back over to Chef Amber to move on to the next thing, and then we can have you show us the bread later. Before we do that, though, we do have a question. I just want to confirm that your green clogs are, I think, Sanita brand, yes?
Yes, they are. I'm very loyal to Sanita. It's a company, Dansko and Sunita actually used to work out of the same factory in Denmark. And so Dansko moved their factory to China. And I thought like their clogs immediately declined. Whereas Sunita still has the same comfort level. So yes, I get all of my clogs from Sunita.
Yes, I also bought a pair once from DSW and they were cheap. Like you can get some good deals on them. They're not like super crazy expensive, but they're really worth it because they'll last you forever. So
definitely. There's a these just like other shoes, they're like seasonal, right? So they have different designs and all this stuff. And so often when a season has ended, they'll slash the prices. Versus like I feel like the black and brown are like always $90 because they're year-round shoes kind of thing. But yeah, Sunita.
all right, Sunita. I'm gonna turn it over to Amber. Let's go back to her cutting board. And I'm gonna see, I think, oh look, I figured out how I can see two of you. I can see both your cameras at the same time.
So exciting, guys. Technology is like adapting 2020 style. Okay, it's
Great. Okay,
we
cool.
waited till last month, but that's fine. Anyway, so I'm moving on to our almond pepita granola. Pepitas are pumpkin seeds. I do have a couple variations on this recipe. We have a couple at Gold Ring, which we'll make sure that you have access to. There's a maple pecan one that's a variation of this that's also very tasty. I really like giving people multiple jars of granola flavor wise. I'm really big in on duos and trios. You'll notice that with literally everything I'm gonna make. I like to be able to give multiple varieties of. And mainly it's because it's really efficient for me. If I'm buying oats and I just buy 2 different types of nuts and 2 different types of seeds, it's really easy for me to just pull it all together real quick and then do multiple variations. It's basically the holiday rendition of meal prepping. So first things first, quick sidebar, I am gonna stick some pecans on my stove top real quick. These are gonna go for the truffles, and I'm just doing it so I can toast them. So we've done it time again, toasting nuts for y'all, but I'm just going to leave them on the stove until right before I smell something nutty. You'll start to smell a little bit oily first. And that's why I get a nice toasty nut flavor on the outside of my truffles. So that's on the side. Okay, so for our granola, I intentionally chose not to measure everything out to start versus Katie's version. Now, this still counts as a mise en place. I still have everything pulled together. I did measure out my oats because they usually come in a giant container. And I do have all of my nuts and seeds. Now, for this recipe, it doesn't really matter too closely. It's not quite like baking. If you're ish, I like rounded scoops. If you're ish on any of the ingredients, that's fine. So the oats, again, just like Katie was mentioning, these are old-fashioned rolled oats, and I'm doing about 1/4 of a cup of my favorite seed and then my favorite nut for this application. These are sliced blanched almonds. They are not salted. They are not toasted because I want them to toast in the oven with my granola. And lastly, I'm doing a little sneaky thing that isn't in the recipe, but is in the chef notes. I love adding chia seeds, flax seeds, poppy seeds. I love adding seeds to literally anything possible because it's a great hidden way that you're able to add a lot of extra omega-3s and fiber without really tasting anything. So I'm just going to add a scoop or 2. Oh, looks like I went with 2. I mean, even I wasn't sure. And I'm just going to put that to the side for a couple of minutes. And then I'm going to mix all of my wet ingredients. Now, as I mentioned, am a pretty lazy cook. So I did not want to pre-measure my oil or my honey, as well as my vanilla, because these things are very easy to measure as I'm going. So all of my wet ingredients are going into a very small bowl. So for my olive oil, it is 1 tablespoon and a teaspoon, which is almost the equivalent, just shy of 1.5 tablespoons. As I mentioned before, 1/2 tablespoon is not a real measurement. And then, I don't know, I usually don't really appreciate having to do multiple wet liquids in a measuring set. So if yours are still on the ring, I do try to pinch them together. So that way, if I pour any more in, it goes in the bowl versus everywhere else. And then our our honey and vanilla. So I'm doing 1 teaspoon vanilla. Now, I do believe, I'm not a vanilla purist, but I do believe in trying to use real vanilla for things that you're going to taste it like this versus an imitation. And then you just want to make sure that you're not getting the foil from the lid in it. Much like Katie's plastic, just not ideal.
I am kind of a vanilla purist. I will put it out there, and I pitch them all the time, but Penzeys makes an amazing vanilla, and they also have like kind of varying levels of quality. So you also have varying levels of price. But I do agree that there are some, the quality is like depending on what you're making. So something like this.
Totally.
Yeah.
Like our farm fresh eggs. If you're gonna buy farm fresh eggs for any particular thing, you want to make sure you're able to taste it. If you're only gonna do it for some, that's the same thing. I get a lot of my ingredients from Thrive Market online. Everything on the site's organic, and most of it's pretty cheap. It ships to your house. And so I got into that a few months ago. So I haven't been able to go over to Penzeys in a long time, but I agree, high quality over there. For this recipe, there are 2 tablespoons of honey. I know that sounds like a lot. It makes 3 cups yield. Now you can definitely do less honey if you so choose. It just won't stick as well, which is completely fine if you like a crumbly granola. All right, and then now I always put my dry spices into my liquid. You could absolutely put it into your dry mixture. Most people would. But I want to make sure that I'm having the flavor fully combined before I add it into my main mix. So I'm going to go ahead and do all of my spices, which includes cinnamon and now my cayenne, I only need 1/8. So I'm going to use the back of my spoon just to do a little bit because I don't want to get cinnamon flavor in there. If you like a little extra spice, you're more than welcome to do that. And then I have this super cute little salt container and 1/8 of a teaspoon of salt. Now, again, that's not a real measurement either in most of our measuring devices. Anyone that's taken one of our classes has noticed that. So you're just doing about 1/2 of a 1/4. And then I'm just going to mix this with a normal spoon. I don't know why I have so many spoons everywhere. Now, this is one of those recipes where you can mix with a mixing device. You can mix with your hands. We really just want to make sure that everything's coated in the liquid and that you're able to keep it very thin. So it's a pretty, little bit wetter than a honey consistency. And then I feel completely confident just using that device to mix all of these together. Now it's not that big of a deal because I know that all this will get mixed together as I'm adding in my liquid. I'm just going to try to move it, start the mixing process by mixing everything, spreading everything over as much surface area as I can. And then I always prefer when I'm working with dry ingredients to spin my bowl and then kind of fluff it in. And then from there I can mix. That way I don't have any loose particles that are going everywhere. Then I'm using the back of my spoon to almost massage the liquid into my oats. I'm just trying to make this as homogeneous as possible. And then as my oven is already preheated to 350, I am, and as Katie mentioned, I did pre-line my baking sheet too, just because I like to keep everything ready and together. I'm going to put my mixture and pour it out. When I do that, you have a couple options. You want to make sure you're making as thin of a layer as possible. However, if you spread it out really far, then you're going to have very loose granola. If you keep your granola a little bit tighter and a little bit closer, you'll get a little bit more chunks and those clusters. So completely up to you and what your preferences are. If you don't have a preference, then I just give it a shake and throw it in. And then halfway through cooking this, I will give it a mix. It says, yeah, bake for 15 minutes. So about 7 minutes in, I'll give it a mix, which more or less really just means a stir or a shake. Okay, and then so I'm gonna move on to my truffles. First, I'll start with the toppings. A couple different things about that. I just have normal shredded coconut, unsweetened, for one of my toppings. I strongly cannot say enough, please don't use sweetened on this. It will be too rich and too sweet and very unpleasurable. So please don't do that to yourself or all those people that you're going to feed it to, because you put a lot of effort in it and you don't want things you make to be inedible. I'm going to give you a cameo of the ones I made the other day, and they're kind of hideous. Like, they're not cute, but they taste delicious. And so make sure I show you how, you know, things are going to taste delicious either way. And I really don't know what I'm doing either, just pretending. Oh, for the granola, I'm adding in my raisins or dried cherries, whatever you're going to do, last, because they will get really dried and almost like concrete charcoal if you put it in and you bake it.
Amber, I'm glad you just mentioned that, because somebody, Gwen, literally just asked the question and I was typing her back right when you said it, that we're going to add them after. And I know we've done it before at the teaching kitchen where the students have done testing and they put them in, and it's like you break your teeth on these raisins because they get so hard. So I never
knew it was a thing, but they burn up and they taste like little bits of concrete.
Yeah, they're not good. They're not
Strongly do not recommend that experience. Not fun. Okay, so I have my coconut, and then I have my cocoa powder mixture. As I told y'all, you have two different options with this. You can just go straight cocoa powder. This is our Hershey's cocoa powder. You just would want to give it a fluff, so that way it's not too hard or have too many balls in it. I also don't keep confectionery sugar in hand, so I just put some normal granulated sugar in my blender and made powdered sugar. So that's what I have here. And then, so I made a blend of that. I said, you guys, I recommend a 4-to-1. I really did more of a 6-to-1 because I don't mind the cocoa powder. I just didn't want too much of it, so I cut it a little bit with that powdered sugar. And then the last one's that toasted nuts. Now I'm going to save y'all having to rewatch cutting up nuts. Katie already did a great job showing you that. If I cut my nuts by hand, this is the texture that I'm looking for. It's not happening, guys. It's just a loose cut, very much what Katie did. This is a version that I put in my spice grinder, or I've also done it in my blender, where it almost brings out the oiliness of it and it's powdery. And so that's another option if you like that texture. You're in comparison. Trying, guys. No. And then the very first version I did not do either of those things. And I literally just have truffles covered in chopped nuts. And I gotta tell you,
Very
Um,
coarsely chopped.
Oh yeah, very, very coarse. So these are the two like variations. You can tell that one's definitely going to be more soft to the palate. Also, notice these aren't very round. They're very rustic. Um, because I wanted to make sure I could do it with spoons and with tablespoons and not just my ice cream scoop, because not everybody has a small enough ice cream scoop. So these previous ones, very
Rustic.
rustic.
Favorite way to describe things that don't look refined is just to say it's rustic. I meant to do that.
So when I drop these in, I'm going to use a separate spoon for my different types of mixtures. Then I'm going to grab out. Now I did put my mixture in the freezer just for the last about right before I started the granola, just so I could make sure it'd be completely formed. And this is what it looks like. Looks like solid chocolate. But when I scoop it, it won't be. I want to make sure you can see it while I do it.
Yep, we can see you good.
So when I scoop it, it's just going through. I'm going very slow because I don't want to add too much body heat to it. So I'm trying to like hold the container a bit far away from me. And then I'm always gonna do a drop spot. Where I'm just gonna scoop my chocolate. Come on. Maybe I did need some body heat on this. Oh, there we go.
That's a little tip though, to use your hand just to warm up the outside of the scoop.
It's the exact same as if I was going to be scooping ice cream. I want to make sure that my body heat is being put in the right spots. So now, as I mentioned, I'm going for a tablespoon size truffles. Now you don't have to make these completely round. If you look online, they're going to tell you to roll these with your hands. You absolutely can. I don't know why. But I'm going to more so shape it slightly and then call it a day. Oh, there you go. Now it wants to cooperate. So if you want, you can give it a press into the scoop so that we have a nice round. And apparently that works way better. So we'll put that to the side for now. And then you do have to work pretty quickly. So I like that these have a little bit of rounds on the bottom. So I feel pretty confident if I just want to put these directly into my mixture. Now, and just coating it in it, and then when I have my mixture on it, then I'm pressing it. This reminds me very much when I'm breading things like chicken tenders or something, or cornstarching tofu. I put as much of the topping on as possible before I press it. So that way I'm able to not get too much stuff on my hands. This is the granola. It just needs a bit of a mix. I strongly recommend that you use a device to mix it.
You don't recommend using your hand on the hot granola, Amber?
Yeah, it only burns slightly. I've been really trying to toughen up my hands.
Such a chef move.
Yeah, exactly. And then if you are rolling your truffles, make sure you get your hands wet with cold water, and then your truffles won't stick to you as well. So I'm pressing it in these toppings into my truffles, so that way I can make a ball shape and I can not get too much stuck to my hand. That's my on there.
So
and then that is my pecan. Yep. And then for my cocoa one, go over here. Now these powders really, I treat the exact same as like a cornstarch. I want to make sure that I'm getting as much on there as possible, and I'm not mixing too hard, because then it's gonna be a lot airborne, and like I got asthma. Can't be huffing on cocoa powder over here. And then this is one of the ones I don't really like to put my hands in too much. And then once it's out, I give it quite a bit of a knock off or shake, because I don't want mouthfuls of cocoa powder. Oh, let's try that again.
He had a bald spot.
Yeah, it wasn't the cutest. It's okay.
That's what's nice though about homemade gifts is that people know that you made it with so much love that even if it doesn't look the most beautiful, like you bought it in a store, I feel like they appreciate it more because they know you made it with your love.
Exactly. And honestly, I mean, my mom was the only one that said something nice about how cute they were, but like I took it. Everybody else is like, I mean, they're not cute, but like they taste good. And I'm like, that's fine. I'm not a baker. Now with the coconut, I'm a little bit more careful because I do not want my coconut to turn brown. So this is one that I do recommend some hand folding with. And then drop it down. And then so if at any point in time as you're mixing these, it's starting to get soft, stick it back in the fridge. So I use these smaller trays, but you could use a plate just the same. I did that so that way when I'm doing it, I can stick it back in the fridge at any point that they're feeling like they're too soft. So when I made this in a very large batch, I scooped all of mine out, put the whole tray in the fridge while I got all of my toppings ready, took out a tray, scooped some, and then put them back in the fridge. And then, so I'm going to put these in the fridge to wait until plating because I do want them to solidify.
Amber, we do have a question for you. So if we don't have a scooper and we have to use like a measuring spoon, do we want to put some oil on our hands, or did you say that water would be good? What's our method if we need to do a lot of rolling?
I recommend using a tablespoon.
Okay, tablespoon.
I'll just show you because Chef Matt and I tried this a dozen different ways to figure out what would be the best recommendation. So scooping a tablespoon and then using a secondary spoon to encourage it out.
Okay.
And then once you have it, yep, exactly. And then it won't have a complete round, so, which none of them will. It's just fine. But I do the exact same thing of shaping it in there. If you're going to shape them and you want them to look super cute, which I'm putting my hands under the coldest water I can, and then shaping it. And I'm not even using my hands. I'm just using the center of my hand, similar to how I'd make meatballs, and just forming the shape. And then once I feel like it is, like I'm using the heat of my hand to melt it into a ball, which is fine. See, it's just a little messier. And then I'll let that sit in the fridge before coating it.
Okay, so water, it would be the best thing to put on our hands, but you're gonna get messy because like it's chocolate and it's gonna melt because your hand is warm. Although my hands right now are really cold, so maybe if you have cold hands, this is a good task for you to do.
I do think because I tried with like an oil base, and because of the fat content, I think it just mixes it too much because of the fattiness of the heavy cream and of the chocolate.
Gotcha.
Just not as cute for the round until you're able to coat it. So you do want that to solidify. You will also notice just in this amount of time that I've been standing here talking at you that the bottom's melted.
Yeah.
So that's why half of my chocolate was a bit too.
So you can do this really like in batches where you're kind of like going back and forth between like putting it in the fridge, bringing it out, do a couple.
And then the edges are always going to be more firm than the center. So if it's too firm, when to go to scoop, just start in the center and work your way out. If it's getting too soft as you're going, then just scoop from the outside and then stick it back in the fridge. So I'm going to stick that in the fridge. And then my granola is about 2 minutes shy, but good thing I checked it. It is toasty.
Oh yeah, look how brown it got.
I know. And then I'm going to let this cool down, but I always like to use parchment over metal. But when I use the parchment and I roll it together, As it's cooling, I do find it clumps a little bit more, and I do like a good clumpy granola. But that way it's like we're basically the last mix.
That looks great, Amber.
And then if it's too hot, you can easily just remove this from the pan for it to cool, which is what I'm gonna do. I'll leave this here. Now when I touch it, it's a little moist, which is completely fine. That's why it's gonna be really important that we let it cool before we put it in any type of container. With anything that we're making, we do not want to have it be moist when it goes into our containers because it's just going to get soggy, but it's also going to get moldy very quickly. And like nobody wants mold unless it's on cheese. Oh, so I see a question. If you're making the truffles for gifting a few days in advance of presentation, do you need to keep them refrigerated? Tell your gift friends to keep them refrigerated. I would. I keep mine in the fridge. I made the batch I showed you before the weekend before Thanksgiving. You can keep them in the fridge for a month or so. But I would definitely recommend anyone that you're giving it to keep it in the fridge and then take it out about 10 minutes before they plan to eat it for most desirable flavor. And just so it lasts longer, you could treat them like chocolates, where you really just don't want to put them anywhere that's humid and hot because it will melt.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would tell the people I'm giving it to, which when we show you the boxes, I'm going to put it in a smaller container and I'll just say, put this one, put that part in the fridge.
Cool.
And then you did notice all of mine are in one container and I had this all stacked. You don't need to separate them. They won't melt into each other, but they just will melt in general. So when I put them in a container, I'm going to stack them and they'll be fine.
Cool. All right. So we're going to finish the granola later, right? I'm going to go back to Chef Katie now and we will do our like wrap up once we get everything done, right? I think that's the plan.
Yeah, that is the plan.
All right. Great. Love it.
Okay. All right, great. So I do have, I want to show you guys what these look like now that they've come out. So I've got my cookies cooling here. I have my one mini one that baked really nicely. It just comes right out of that little metal ramekin. And then you'll see that I actually popped the breads out of the pans. And this is because you do want to cool them. They'll get kind of soggy-ish. So I do pop them out, but I held on to those little mini loaves since most of the stuff that I bake for people gets shipped. I like having the metal tins still stay on the bread. So once my bread has completely cooled, which hopefully will be right around the end of this, you'll see I'll pop them back into my the metal tins. All right, so I see that we're making the vinegar next. I'm glad you wrote that because oh wait, wrong recipe.
I put the wrong link, but that's the right plan. All right, that's the right.
Okay. I love it because I will say that this one we wrote as a recipe because that's just how we have to do things when we're doing large classes like this. But this is like a non-recipe. So I'm going to tell you guys what I did. So I found these really cute bottles at Michael's. And while Amber was doing her truffles, I filled them up with water and I poured them into my liquid measuring cup so that I would know exactly how much water. So these both hold about a half a cup. So I'm going to use a cup of vinegar. I think the way we wrote the recipe shows it in a larger amount because I would think if you were going to make these as a gift that you would want to make about 6, but it all depends on what size bottles you end up finding. So don't feel like, tied to this very specific recipe because really whatever size bottles you get, just measure your vinegar or your oil because both are going to be made the exact same way. I am going to make vinegar. I am using this Bragg's apple cider vinegar because when people move out of my neighborhood, they give me all of their leftover groceries, which is like an amazing perk, I have to say. I'm always so grateful for it. I do love this Bragg's, but like usually I just use like Heinz brand apple cider vinegar. I am a big pusher of apple cider vinegar. I love it much more than just white vinegar. And it is that kind of middle of the road where you can make a flavored vinegar or use it in a recipe and it isn't as dominant as like a red wine vinegar or champagne vinegar or like sherry vinegar. So I usually have a lot of that around. So I'm just gonna measure my 1 cup and put it into, oh, which of course this one's like just a little shy.
And so Katie, with this recipe too, you're doing vinegar today, but basically we could do the exact same thing with oil. And that's how we've written it, right? Like
Yep,
oil,
that's exactly.
vinegar, it's the same method. It's just different medium that you're infusing the flavor into. So today
Yep.
you're doing vinegar.
Yep, exactly. Today I'm using vinegar. And I have to say, I mean, I guess I'm doing it because it's my preference. I cook more with flavored vinegars than I tend to with flavored oils. So that's just where, like, that's why I wanted to do it, is because I knew that's what I would use. But yes, you will do the same thing. I just have a little pot here on my stove that I'm going to add this 1 cup of vinegar into, and I'm just going to get it so that it's nice and hot. It doesn't have to be like ripping, boiling, but you do want it to be hot. And then now I've got my glass bottles here. And again, at my awesome farmer's market, I got these really cool peppers, and I left the stems on. I mean, I guess maybe I'll trim that one, but so you'll see, where is this? That I still have like the top on there, the whole thing. I'm just going to put right into my bottle. And I'm going to do 2 because, you know, they're pretty. So why not? Now, I will say, if you give this gift, you know, like if I was giving somebody this tomorrow, I would recommend that they wait a couple of days at least. It's going to grow, but it doesn't like grow and grow and grow. So it's not going to get spicier every week until it's like no longer palatable. But it is definitely going to be spicier on day 6 than it is on day 1. So, and then I just keep them in my pantry. I'll show you guys the one I have. Is my tarragon vinegar. So this I just make at home, same process, you know, I like rinse off my tarragon from the garden, I pour hot vinegar on top of it, and that's all I have to do. These little bottles, your funnel is not going to fit. At least my funnel did not fit in it. So I am going to use a measuring cup to pour them in there so that it doesn't spill everywhere. But I will also put them on top of a sheet tray in case I do spill my vinegar everywhere. I have accepted my level of messiness, I guess, so that at least I'm prepared that cleanup is way less when you're only cleaning up a sheet tray and not your counter and your floor simultaneously. Because that's how things go down at my house.
Chef, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Okay, so Christina wants to know, does Katie like to use white vinegar to infuse anything? And then also the recipe mentions using roasted garlic. And I think I put that in thinking about oil, like that roasted garlic would be particularly good in oil. But she wants to know, would you use raw garlic clove in any of these infusions? Do you have any thoughts about any of that to share?
I probably wouldn't use raw garlic. Only because raw garlic's flavor does grow and grow and grow. So if I was gonna do a garlic oil, I would keep my oil like warm but low and put whole cloves of garlic in it until they become that like golden nutty brown. I would then let it cool completely. And maybe this would be good advice if you were making the oil at home. An oil burn is going to be 100 times worse than like a vinegar burn. So if you are doing oil, you can, like if I was doing this with the peppers in oil, I could warm up my oil, drop my peppers in there, let it chill until it's cool. And then you can pick your peppers out and drop them in and then pour the oil on top, just for safety's sake. And if you are using hot vinegar to put in here, just obviously this is going to get very hot. So you do want to be careful with that. And so let's see if I can.
What about the white vinegar question? Do you ever use white vinegar, or is it too harsh? What do you think?
Yeah, I use white vinegar to clean things. That's my rule of thumb about white vinegar. Like I'll wipe a counter off with it. It's not bad. If you like white vinegar, don't let me persuade you to go otherwise. It is, I do think, astringent in comparison to apple cider vinegar or red wine vinegar.
White wine vinegar,
yeah, so that's why I tend to, but I feel like apple cider vinegar and white vinegar are very similar in cost. You can buy a varying container, like even at the grocery store, I feel like they sell a gallon jug of apple cider vinegar and white vinegar, but you're gonna be a lot harder to find that for like red wine or champagne. So in that sense, I think they're kind of interchangeable, but my personal preference is apple cider, and my white vinegar lives under my sink. Okay, so my oil came to a good simmer. So you can see it's like still kind of steaming. I'm just gonna pour it into this measuring cup. Whew, and then breathe in all that vinegar. And then I'm just gonna pour it right into this. Yeah.
Oh, yes, you are having to be very careful there. I will say, I have invested in a set of little funnels, and it's something that you think you might not use very often, but
maybe I should have.
They come in handy, the little funnels. Especially if you do these kinds of things, or like I do, I just mentioned in the chat that, if you do any kind of pickling, or sometimes you just need a little funnel action.
A little funnel, it's true. Yeah. Well,
that bottle neck is very narrow too. So
yeah.
I will say, like, if you were doing this I think we wrote in the recipe, you can do it just in a jar. It doesn't have to be in the cute bottle. You can definitely, oh, look at this. What a great.
Look, how about that hack right there, baby?
Oh my gosh, love it. Squeeze bottle lid as a funnel. Amazing.
I'm like, copyright that, please.
Oh yeah, look, Lori has a good tip. You can make a funnel out of parchment paper or foil. That is a good tip too.
It would. So I considered that the parchment paper with like a hot liquid.
Yeah,
I would a little, leery.
A little. You'd have to be quick about it. Now, Romy just made a comment to me. She wants to know, what do we think about, like, if we cut the chili pepper in half or gave it a little slit? Would that give us a little extra hot flavor?
It would probably make it hotter faster.
Okay.
But really the heat is going to penetrate the skin. It's gonna, get all the oils out of the inside and everything too.
Okay.
So, there it is. There's our pepper vinegar.
Fun.
I used to work at a restaurant that made, I'm gonna wait to put this cap on until it's, really cool. But we used to make a dip with lima beans and pepper vinegar and butter, and it was delicious. I think they called it like Cajun hummus, or they had kind of like a silly name for it. They are now running he is at least running a like New Orleans inspired restaurant in London.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, good luck with that.
Well, you know, people.
All right. I'm like, I have my Jazz Fest posters here trying to block the light from my my window. Okay, are we gonna move on to nuts?
Yeah,
You
I
ready
think
for
we're
that?
doing nuts now. I'll drop that recipe in the chat.
So much like everything else that I've done, I've got my mise en place here. So I've already chopped up my rosemary. I've got my salt and cinnamon and nutmeg and cayenne all mixed together here. My oil is measured. And if I didn't give away enough about myself when I talked about the chocolate, I also have like a ridiculous stash of nuts that I keep in my freezer. Um, things go rancid really fast in New Orleans. Like it's just very hot here and humid, and so I learned many years ago that just store your nuts in the freezer. Nuts are too expensive to risk losing them. Trader Joe's, I also love their nut selection. I've really promoted them a lot today, and I want to be very clear that like I don't buy a lot of processed foods from Trader Joe's, even though they do have a great frozen food aisle and I'm tempted by it. But some things that they have are like you just can't find at the regular grocery store for the same price. So like that pound and a half of chocolate, that's nothing but chocolate, is really great to go there. And they have just a ton of a variety of nuts. And they also sell their nuts in a variety of stages. So they have unsalted raw nuts, they have unsalted but like toasted nuts, they have salted and toasted nuts, and so it's nice, depending on your recipe. I love having that variety. So in my container here, this 1 cup container, I have some cashews, I have some pumpkin seeds, I have some whole almonds, and I have some walnuts. So the sky's the limit of what you want to do with these nuts. You can do one type of nut, you can do a mixture of nuts. You could definitely throw in like some sunflower seeds, sesame seeds would also probably go really great in this recipe. So, in that sense, whatever, the sky's the limit. So now we're just going to dump everything into this skillet. And I am going to be really honest, I have not made this recipe before. This one's Heather's. So I don't know if Heather has anything to add. I do have my pan on like a medium. Ooh, I guess that was a little hot.
Yeah, I would say drop it in and then turn your heat back on. You'll be good. I have made this recipe. I did it with chopped pecans and the pumpkin seeds at the same time. I was trying to get a sense of like, does it work with both? I will see Elaine just mentioned the seeds might need less time. So I would say if you are going to mix like nuts and seeds together, just be mindful of the different sizes that you're working with. That's why I used the chopped pecans. I didn't do a whole pecan with those smaller seeds. This recipe is really cool. I was also really, we kind of were working on this because we have a party coming up for our medical students, and we were doing too many recipes that needed the oven. And I was trying to say, okay, can we do a spiced nut on the stove? And so I liked this too because it used the maple syrup. And what's cool is that you get to really see the like stages of the sugars in the maple syrup are going to go through these stages, which we did include that in information like in the printed recipe for you. But they're going to go from being like thin and liquidy to then they're going to get thicker and more glazy. And then eventually they're going to dry out and get that kind of crystallized grainy texture. Which I think is pretty fun to see.
Yeah. Now, one thing I did that was not written in the recipe said just to dump everything in. Mm-hmm. I saved the nuts for last. And I put like a little bit of sorry, I'm having some technical difficulties here. Here we go. I used a little whisk to make sure that my maple syrup and all my spices were a uniform thing before I dumped my nuts in.
Yeah.
That way you can at least just avoid the risk of there being like any clumps.
Yeah. And I mean, this method, there is a different way. I mean, Katie and I talked about this before this class about there's a way you can do spiced nuts on the stove. And traditionally, a lot of times you'll do this egg white concoction where it gives you that crispiness. And that's cool too. It's definitely a fun method, but I was really just trying to develop something. And I found this recipe online through a blog. It's givemesomeoven.com. And she had a really great technique, I thought, for doing it on the stove. So we thought it would be fun to try it this way.
And I believe it was Amber that made the note that now it's also vegan, whereas it would not have been otherwise.
Yes. So if you have any vegan people in your life, this could be a great recipe to make for them. So Elaine just asked, she assumes that the syrup is made everything stick to the nuts. I've seen recipes where they only seem to rely on water. Wouldn't things fall off once the nuts cook and the water evaporates? I've never seen anything with water, but I will say this should come out. I did this myself a few weeks ago, and because the way the sugar goes through those different stages, it definitely crisps, and you do get everything still stuck to the nuts, and you get that kind of, it is a little similar to what you would get with the egg white trick.
I feel like I'll leave egg white trick is, and that you just whisk an egg white. You can do that by hand. Egg white goes a long way in this nut recipe. I think, like, I would probably use one egg white to so you can really your hand or your peaks of your whites. It does that is crispy, crunchy when baked.
Oh no, we lost her. I know. Okay, we will. I guess she was getting broken up there for everybody. We definitely lost her, but I'm sure she'll hop back on here. I will say, if you're doing that recipe right now alongside her, just keep an eye on those nuts and stir them periodically. In the recipe we've typed up there, it does say that, you know, as they are getting closer to the end, they need stirring more frequently. So in the beginning, you know, you can go every minute or so, but as it's getting thicker and thicker and eventually it starts to get dry and crystallized, that's when you want to really be kind of vigorously stirring. I will definitely get her to tell us about the egg white thing once she comes back on and we can get her clarified. Amber, do you want to go ahead and
I think I'm here.
Oh, you are back. Okay, there you are.
I know, I did just disappear and I was like, oh, where'd you guys go?
You were really breaking up there, so we missed all of those great things you said about the egg white.
Oh, okay. No, that's easy. So what I was saying about the egg whites is just that one egg white is good for about 3 cups of nuts. So it's not like you need to bust out your KitchenAid or your hand mixer to make these soft peaks. And a soft peak means that when you like dip your whisk in it, that it goes up, but then it kind of falls, right? You're not really looking for like a stiff peak that we know for like meringue. So once you coat your eggs in that with the sugar, and I usually do rosemary and cayenne as well, it makes a really nice, crispy, crunchy coating on it. And then I want to show you guys how my nuts are looking here.
Thick and syrupy now?
Yeah, so I could really smell it. I could tell like that it was like getting stiffer and was like I almost would say it was like almost wanting to burn. So I turned my heat off and I was really just using the residual heat from my burner. And then I already have my parchment lined paper waiting here for me so that I can get them out of the pan.
And this is going to be kind of a similar concept to like what Amber was talking about with the granola, where they will still have a little moisture to them at this point, and then as they cool, they're going to kind of harden, and you can make them as clumpy or as not clumpy as you like.
Yep. Exactly.
And that was pretty quick, Katie. I just told somebody it could take up to 10 minutes. I know when I was doing it at the kitchen, I did a small batch in like a little nonstick pan, and I kept the heat really low because I was scared. So it took me a while, but you probably had your heat up higher.
Yeah, well, so remember I was like yapping and I already had the burner on. So I'm sure maybe you guys noticed when I poured that maple syrup in that it already just immediately went, you know, it started bubbling. So I think that's part of why mine went so fast. So, are we going back to Amber now?
Wait, before we switch, Romy has a great question that I love. She is actually in London with us
Oh,
in this class and wants to know the name of that restaurant if you happen to know it.
I know. I can find out. It definitely. I think it's called Louis. I'm pretty sure it's like named after Louis Armstrong. But let me see.
All right, you get that information. We're gonna turn it over to Amber in the meantime,
Okay.
and then we'll share that for everybody.
Okay.
All right, so Chef Amber, now are we just coming to this view of you for right now?
Yeah, I got rid of the other camera.
Okay, we liked it, but okay.
It was very efficient, but I was under the impression I was just combining things, and then I remembered the spice blend recipe. So, alas,
Right, it's okay. We'll be able to see it.
So, sorry, I've been nibbling on my granola. So it's cold. I gotta tell you, it felt so wet when it came out of the oven. I didn't even believe myself that it was gonna work. Here we are. It's worked. So I'm gonna put my raisins in now. I'm just making sure that all of my raisins are like not stuck together in a blob. And then I'm just gonna lightly just give it a zhuzh. And that's literally it for this. So when I'm making my granola, I'll plate it in a second. But when I'm taking this, I'm gonna leave it in the parchment. And so I'm just gonna Katie will tell you all about the containers that we're putting things in, but because it's her great idea, I will not steal the thunder. But I'm just going to give it a shake in there until my heart feels content. And then I really love these containers because then we're able to put some ribbon on it, or we're able to put some wrapping paper or whatever it is, and a cute little label. And I really love functional gifts. I know that I will eat this if it's in this type of container in my cabinet versus an alternative, which I'll show you two different options with our spice blends. So I'm going to save y'all the trouble of watching me measure a bunch of random spices per this the spice trio option. And I pre-did two of them. This one being the garlic and herb spice blend, and this pretty one being, well, it was pretty. Sorry, I made all the separate piles, but all of the ones for the taco spice. And then for these, I'm just giving them a mix, so that way it's completely combined. And I have it on. Now you can multiply this recipe just fine. You can multiply any of our spice blends. When we make them for community class, we take the normal recipe and multiply it sometimes tenfold. So it's really whatever volume you're looking for. And then my garlic and herb one actually is very similar to a cheesy flavor because they have so much nutritional yeast in it. That's intentional. So that way we have an umami. And it's very tasty if you sprinkle on like pita chips or taco chips, if you're making your homemade tortillas. So those are two of my blends.
Amber, do you have your like container of nutritional yeast by chance?
I just, hold on.
Just to show people what it looks like, maybe, if for people who may not be familiar with it.
Okay.
Or if Katie has a bottle, she could hold it up, maybe.
Yeah, I don't have a brand one, but it's literally just this powdered yellow stuff.
Chef Katie's got some too. She's showing.
Yeah, I haven't been keeping mine in a label container. Almost everything I have gets re-put in a mason jar. But most of this is the nutritional yeast, and it's just this yellow flaky. I hate to do it, but it almost looks like fish food flakes. And it's deactivated.
I always say it looks like fish food, and it kind of people need to be aware. It's got a strong smell. It almost smells a little like fishy food when you open, and sometimes it comes in a container that sort of looks like that with the little like plastic lid on top, but give it a chance because honestly, it's so good and flavorful, and it really does have that Parmesan-y, cheesy kind of taste to it. It's all.
I put it in literally anything I cook, soup, stews, pastas, anything I'm making, taco meat, I put it in there. Nobody can taste it, but it has all of your B vitamins, which is really important, especially for if you're vegetarian or vegan. And I really love the added flavor to it. So it's a win-win. And then Joseph, yeah, you just leave out the coriander if you don't have it. You could also do some dried cilantro if you wanted. But any of our spice blends, if you don't have a certain spice, you don't necessarily need it. Similarly, if you only have chili powder but not cayenne, or you only have cayenne and not chili powder, that's fine. We can really make variations on these. But we have a couple different options for plating these. I'm going to put it in these cute little jars because, as I mentioned, I really love function. And in my particular kitchen, jars and containers, I don't know if you noticed all my spices, they're in these little containers that we label and just have them on hand. So I know that a jar similar to my cinnamon sugar are all very functional in jar containers, so I can easily pinch it. So that's how I'm going to do these two for our plating purposes, quote unquote plating. And then that way I can put just a cute little label on them. Actually, just go on. However, you have a couple different options here. And I love options. Other option is what I did with our third spice, our Moroccan spice blend, and I put it in a Ziploc baggie. So that way I can do all three, pretend that's another one. I can put all three of them together, staple it over, and just say contain, this spice, this spice, this spice with a cute little label, and I can put this bag right into my basket with all my other things that I'm giving away. So there's definitely different ways that are functional for this application. For me, I love jars, and then it's always handy because then people receive jars and then they're multi-purpose later. Obviously, it's going to be more cost effective and more efficient to use the metal lids that come on them. I just don't have any metal lids presently, so I'm using these plastic leak-proof ones. But then I can just stack them up, and then I could either, when I put my label on it, I can just put them separately in the basket, or I could do something where I can stack them up and wrap them up. So it's really whatever you want to do. It's all up to you. And then we can start putting our products together. So for my truffles, I can decide. I love containers. Now, I have so many options. I can take these plastic bags and put my truffles in there, which will be nice. I could put my granola in bags, and that way I can seal it over too. Or I can do them all in different size jars. So it's really whatever you want. I know Chef Katie collects jars from just eating, whether it be jelly jars or I know personally I like to keep my jelly jars and my pickle jars and all of those, and I use them as storage. But if you do something pretty consistent, you can get a lot of ones similar to these, and that way you're able to repurpose, which is really fun. Before I put any of this stuff into any more containers, I'm going to send y'all over to Katie because she'll be able to give you the full concept thought process behind how to put your stuff into containers.
Yeah, cool. All right, great. Hi. So I was just packaging up some stuff to show you what your possibilities are. So I do think that this is just beautiful in its own and speaks for itself. I would maybe put a piece of tape over it if I was going far with it. I probably wouldn't ship something with just a cork like this. But I've got these great little plastic bags that they sell at Michael's. So I have my cookies in here with just a little ribbon. I have put the loaf back into the metal tray and have just put that into one of these plastic ones with some ribbons on it. And then at Michael's, I was pretty excited to find they have these jars that look like mason jars, but they're actually plastic. And that makes things nice, again, when you're like shipping. It's also just a little more cost effective. I'm really stingy about my mason jars, so I'm not really looking to give them away. But something plastic like this would be nice. But I wanted to show you guys, there's 2 ways to kind of pretty it up. You can just do like a very simple wrap of wrapping paper around it. Or with the lid, I cut a circle of wrapping paper. I put a little piece of tape on the lid, and now that tapes that in place, right? And I've got my mixed nuts in here, and I can put that on top, and then simply tie a bow. Give it like a little smoosh down here. That little bit of tape should help it from not going everywhere. And then it might help if you have like a friend that might want to help you put this.
You need that little finger. You need the finger to hold it while you do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, Lori just mentioned that you could do the same thing like you're doing now, but the little circle of cute fabric, if you cut it with the little pinking shears, the little zigzag scissors, that's cute too.
Or like you could even do this.
Oh yeah. Oh my gosh, I love it.
Problem solved. Look how cute that
is. So cute. I love that we're getting a little craft lesson right now too in our cooking class.
And then, you know, filling stuff like this can really help, you know, give a little extra pizzazz to a like box or basket that you're putting together.
Now, Chef, I need to know this year because this is my first year that I would be having to mail my homemade gifts. Do we have, I know that you've done this. So do you have any particular tips for how we protect things? Or do we need to be mindful of anything? Or we just sort of like put some stuffing in there, put some tissue paper, wrap it?
I mean, I certainly think it depends on what you send. In the past, I have sent a lot of baked cookies. And I know sometimes that they don't make it to my family as beautiful as they were when they left New Orleans, which I think unfortunately is just kind of something you suck up. I don't know that it has stopped any of them from eating everything that I have sent to their houses. But you know, that's kind of the great thing too about baked loaves like this, or plastic jars like this that gives you some extra buffer.
The plastic jar I didn't even know that was a thing. Were they pretty inexpensive over at Michael's, the plastic?
Yeah, I think I got 6 for like $3 or $4. And oddly, they were over by the checkout. Like you would have thought they would have put them over by the rest of the mason jars, which of course had like already been cleared out. They had a pretty dismal selection. But these were up by the front. It's this brand.
Yeah, Lori just mentioned too that it would be so much cheaper to mail because of the weight issue too.
Yeah, it's true. I tend to do the 2-day priority box, in which case like weight is irrelevant. It just makes it easier for me. I am actually the lunatic that goes into the post office with like 8 medium-sized boxes, and I actually string them all together so that I can carry it in this tower of boxes. Because I don't know, New Orleans, man, you can't be going in and out of the post office like that. Nobody's gonna hold your spot in line. They're like, they're not gonna help you. So,
and I will say this, you know, probably a good tip would be if you're gonna mail stuff this year, do it sooner rather than later because it may get delayed. You never know. The mail is having some tricky times these days, but we have one more question though about the oil and vinegar. And I know I asked you about this privately offline, but I want to ask so everybody will know the answer. Do you have any feeling about what we should tell recipients for those infused oil and vinegars as far as like an expiration date? Is it pretty open-ended? Christina was asking about that one.
Yeah, I would say that it's pretty open-ended. I mean, I would recommend it gets used, you know, within 6 months to a year. You know, hopefully. So actually, I think a good tip is that if you're going to give this to somebody who you're like maybe uncertain if they would definitely use it, making a recipe to go that calls for that flavored vinegar or that flavored oil, it's probably going to up the chances that they're going to utilize it. But I also would be really mindful of who, like, I love my mom, but I would not give this to my mom because I know that my mom wouldn't use it. But like, I have a lot of chefy friends in New Orleans, and I would, feel very confident that they would use it up. But yes, the vinegar, both the vinegar and the oil are very like self-preserving, in the sense that as long as it's all covered. So, when we get to the bottom of this bottle and maybe half of these peppers are exposed, you might have a little more risk, but at that point they should be pickled anyways.
Yeah.
I have no problem keeping vinegar in the refrigerator. It just would certainly lengthen its life, but not alter it. Whereas like if you put a flavored oil in the fridge, it's going to solidify. And then in order to use it, you're going to have to bring it back to room temperature. And that just seems like a hassle.
Yeah. I will say, if you're thinking like, oh, I don't know a way to use flavored oil and vinegar, just make salad dressing. A basic, I mean, I do that all the time. Just a very simple, like oil vinegar kind of concoction, shake it in a jar, toss it over your salad. It's so delicious. And you get that just little like boost of flavor.
Yeah, well, I think that's a great plug for the numerous salad dressings that we have on our website. That if you made this recipe for somebody, whether you did pepper oil or you used an herb, or even for the flavored oils, you could grab one of the recipes off of our website, print it up on, either you can handwrite it, which would be extra cute, or print it up and include it with the bottle. You could tie a ribbon around it and have the recipe attached to it.
Yeah, great idea.
Help people be into that.
Great, great, great. All right, I'm going to swap back over to Amber one more time because I think she wants to show. Actually, I'll leave you both up there.
Oh.
We'll do the side by side. So
Yeah,
Amber's going to show us a cute basket. All right,
Yeah.
Amber.
So for and like I mentioned, anything I give, I want it to be functional. I really love function. So what I like to do with baskets is, instead of putting a filler, I like to do something like a mapina, aka a dish rag, or some type of towel, because then people can use them too. And it adds a lot of color. So it's like a festive, fun stuffing. So I have a couple options. I'm going to put just a standard one on the bottom, just that way it's going to add some soft, but also so that way I can add some height. And then from there, I can add, maybe I just want to have some colors hanging out the side. I don't know what I want.
Because you can get a little pack of dish towels pretty cheap a lot of places.
Exactly.
Little Christmas
And
dish towels.
absolutely. And then I can just put my multiple containers in here depending on how I want it. Now, guys, I'm not delusional. I know nobody wants spice blend with their truffles with their granola right now. Like, so I would say if I were going to make this a little bit more, I would absolutely be adding in some of the baked goods from Katie, or I'd pick a theme. So I know that if I put my my granola in here, I can make it really fun and flavorful. Now, I wouldn't necessarily want to put a bag of truffles, because in this type of application, they can easily break. So a container of them is pretty helpful. And then, as Katie and Heather were mentioning, we can figure out what we want to be doing. So for my spice blends, I know that I really love putting some spiced mixes into oil to put like on bread. You can either use that to make like a similar to a garlic bread or a toasted pita, or you literally just in some oil that you can dip. So I would perhaps put a bottle of my favorite olive oil in here if I did not make my own, which my plan is to make my own, and then add that in there. And then maybe you're like, while they're eating this bread and they're doing with their oil and their spices, then they're going to have their truffles. Maybe I'm going to put some type of bottle. This is my favorite. I put sparkling apple cider in everything, because then it makes it very family friendly. So like I can put a bottle of this in here. So you can do a hybrid of something that you've made some items, and some of the things are store-bought if you decide to. Or, you can put Katie's oil with some spice blends, and then the loaf of bread next to her, some type of variation there. But I do just want to really, in this type of application, I really just want to drive home that you can figure out functional ways to add softness And I feel confident that when I wrap this up in my string and I go to deliver this in person, I'm not concerned about anything breaking because everything in its own container. And then when these arrive at someone's house, they can easily take the container of truffles and put it in the fridge and move everything where they want it. I don't know how many of y'all have received some gift baskets that you're like, cool, I'm so glad, but like half this stuff I don't know what to do with, and I don't know where it goes because there's no real spot, it doesn't really fit a niche. So it's to me, I really find it really nice to have multiple containers of the separate things versus a bunch of separate little bags. But teach their own. I could put the truffles in there. I mean, I'll give this to my mom. It'll be great. She'll be very happy with it.
You're already done with your mom. I'm jealous.
Can you drive that over to my house, please? Thank you.
Yeah, seriously.
I love that little tip though of like doing the semi-homemade. I don't know how many people on this call are fans of Barefoot Contessa, but I know she's like a huge, Ina Garten is a big fan of like, you don't have to do every single thing from scratch. You do a little combo of like some store-bought, some scratch made, and then you save yourself, you're putting the love in, but you don't have to spend 3 days in the kitchen to do it. So
absolutely.
Katie, what's your final parting words?
Oh, well, I think a good thing to know is that you also don't have to give somebody as much stuff as Amber put in that basket. So like I could very happily give this to my daughter's first grade teacher and with a bottle of wine so that there's something homemade, something store-bought. And yeah, like I think the idea too is to like make it fun and that hopefully you enjoy producing goods for people. So don't overwhelm yourself to the point where you're like no longer happy. These nuts, you certainly could multiply this recipe, 5 or 10 times. And maybe that's just the one thing you give away this year is like one of these recipes. I do want to say that the breads stay in the freezer really well for like up to a month. The cookie dough also lasts in the freezer for up to a month. So I think we talked about it at the beginning, but like I definitely like to give some baked goods that people don't feel like they have to eat them immediately, but that they can be stashed away for that cold January day when the holidays are over and your body is like, why am I not getting as much sugar as I did last month? So that you have that stuff ready to go.
And they're very easy to be themed. I know that I've done ones where like I just take a bag and I put in the bottle of whether it be sparkling apple cider, and then a little container in one bag and like tie it up. And this is the bag I'm going to give you. Like it has 2 things and it's very functional. But also I've done a lot of ones. Yeah, exactly. Just give them a log of dough. But I've also.
Well, yeah, I did want to show you guys, like I finished it by just writing the name, what you bake, the little ribbon on the side. And because I used parchment paper, if they unwrap it nicely, they can actually use this parchment paper on their cookie sheet to actually bake the cookies on.
Genius. Genius.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Well, I loved this class. I hope that everybody did too. I'm going to bring us back to our view so we can see everybody's little faces. Yay. Okay, so hope you all enjoyed this. If anybody cooked along, I hope that your recipes were successful today. If you didn't cook along, hopefully you'll think about doing some of these recipes later so that you can gift things. Or like I said before, maybe you just want to keep it for yourself. That's fine. We all deserve
Hey, Heather, can I give a quick shout out? There is a young girl on this Zoom. It's got the name Lucy, and she's been like cooking along. How old is she? What do you think? Like
she's
10. Yes. That has made my day. That makes me so happy. So see, look, a 10-year-old can do it. Oh,
Yep.
look, speaking of.
Oh, they're already dabbling in the bake.
Hey guys.
This is when you know the Zoom's over, is when my kids show up.
like, okay, we're hungry.
Shh.
Thank you everyone for coming. We hope you enjoyed this class. Don't forget, if you didn't already sign up for the next one, I'll include the link in the email I send out with the video so you can definitely get in on that. We're doing some great new recipes. I have to type up the final menu, but we do have that ready to go. I think we're doing some like salted caramel, if I recall correctly. We're doing some really great stuff, more sweet and savory options for you in December. And then we've also got some great classes coming up for y'all in January and February. I will say we're going to kind of get back to our health vibes for those early classes. We know after the holidays, it's a good time to kind of reset and get back to some of our good healthy habits. So we'll be back to that before we know it. Thank you for your support of the Goldring Center for Culinary Medicine. It means the world to us. And this has been so fun to be able to share these virtual kitchen classes with you. We hope you had fun, and we will see you next time.
Thank you.